This weekend, Ghanaians were met with some very, very terrible news. We all heard about the passing of the legendary Daddy Lumba. From Saturday till today being Tuesday, almost any station that you tune into, television, radio, online, there's been messages of condolences, tributes flowing, people sharing emotion about, the passing of this absolute legend, and it's got everyone talking. In fact, yesterday, which was Monday, on CTFM, I listened to CTFM quite regularly. The entire morning show, Bernard Avler and his team, they dedicated the show to this great musician. And when I think about Daddy Lumba, I mean, I don't know, there isn't any Ghanaian out there that probably doesn't know or haven't heard about Daddy Lumba or haven't heard about any of his music. Almost everybody in Ghana knows who Daddy Lumba is and the music that he's blessed Ghanaians with. When the news came out and people in the industry, people who are close to him, family, close associates, they started pouring out messages and sharing their experiences and their relationship with this great man. The other thing I also realized is that they weren't the only one who had something to say about him. Almost everybody had something to say about that Lumba. I would say fans who enjoyed his music, and even those who were not very ardent fans. But if you're a Ghanaian, there's a high probability, there's probably an 80 to 90% chance that you've at one point in your life heard a Daddy Lumba music, because this man made music about every possible theme you can think about. Anything you can think about, this man made music about. About love, about heartbreak, about death, life, money, work, endurance, hate, anything you can think about, any theme of music that you can think about, Daddy Lumba has a music that spoke to it. And so it was just natural that most people had something to say about Daddy Lumba. And it was just right. So I'm not just trying to tap into a trend or anything, but just like everybody else who has a story or an experience about Daddy Lumba's music, I share same. And for me, I'm not one of the very ardent fans of Daddy Lumba, but I knew his music and I loved his music. I mean, for us growing up, we listened to the radio a lot. My father was a radio man. And so most of the times in the mornings, and even at a point in our time, most evenings, would listen to the radio. And it was very common that, listening to the radio, they would play Daddy Lumba's music. And so consciously or unconsciously, you would hear his music. And I think at a point in my life when I grew up, when I began to hear his music again, I sort of connected or remembered, or it brought some form of nostalgia, because it sort of reminded me of growing up and listening to his, hearing his music being played on the radio. So it was not like I intentionally I intentionally bought Daddy Lumba's cassettes. Cassettes were a thing back in the day. No, but I mean, you just hear it naturally on the radio, being played. And you sort of remember and connect to it instantly. Now, there's one very vivid memory I remember about Daddy Lumba and his music. I remember back when he released Ben Waha. I don't know exactly which year that was. Maybe I'll find out. But the year in which he released Ben Waha, I quite remembered our parents admonishing us not to sing the song, because in the neighborhood, I mean, when a song comes out, it's natural that the kids pick it up and they are singing when we are playing on the streets. It comes up, everybody's singing a line or two, even when we don't even know what it actually means. And so I remember vividly my parents warned us that we should never be heard singing the Abin Waha track. And at that age, I wonder, like, why, why not? The song is banging, but I think my parents knew why. And it connects back to another observation or point that I've made about Daddy Lumba is that he had a way with lyrics. Even love lyrics, he had a way to, put out lyrics. And it was when I grew up that I realized why my parents, warned us not to listen to Abi Waha, because when you are grown up and you hear the lyrics, you realize that it had a very deep meaning, quite explicit in a certain sense. But that was who the man was. That was the sort of experience he gave Ghanaians. Today I didn't step out early, quite late with my run. The streets are empty as usual, but the weather is kind of dark. The sun is trying to peek behind some clouds, but there are quite some dark clouds out. I suspect it might rain. In fact, it did rain yesterday. So yesterday I couldn't go out for my run because it rained most of the morning. So I stayed indoors. Another day of steps lost. Maybe I'll make it up for it today by going 20,000 steps. Who knows? I'll give it a try and see. Now let's talk some more about Daddy Lumba, because I think it's just fitting that I share some more about Daddy Lumba. One thing again about this man that bewildered me was his lyrics. There are times you would never hear what Daddy Lumba was saying. I mean, for me, I don't know for you, but some of the music that he made, I would never have guessed the lyrics. I could never hear what he was saying. I don't know if he did it intentionally on purpose. Some of his innuendos like, he had a way of enunciating some words that made it so difficult to even hear. I don't know if it was trying to hide what he was saying, or to give you, or to put you in the position to listen over and over again. I don't know if it was a strategy. He did it on purpose for you to listen and listen over again, try to hear what he was saying, and by so doing fall in love with his music. I don't know if it was a tactic, but to date, there are some of his songs that I cannot even I love the songs, but I don't even know what the lyrics are exactly. So yesterday on the City FM show, when Bernard and his team were discussing Daddy Lumba, Frema Eduyebo, I think that's her name, and this lady is so good. She actually knew most of the lyrics of Daddy Lumba songs, and so she was helping the team break down some of these songs, what they meant, what he was trying to say, and my mind was blown, like, wow, so this was exactly what this guy was saying in the song, and I could never have guessed if, I didn't get that sort of breakdown. One of the things that stood out to me was that he had about 33 albums. When I mentioned this to somebody, the person exclaimed and said, whoa, but I was not surprised at all. The other thing was that he had about 200 songs, 200 and something songs. I personally think that he had more. That's my personal thought. I think that Lumba probably has more than we are even probably thinking about, maybe some unreleased music, whatever. But he had such a great catalog of music. It was just insane. And I can't seem to fathom an individual who'd make album after album. And I had a friend who is a creator who also does music, and I remember one time giving him advice that when you're a creator and you especially like music, you need inspiration, of course, you need ideas, but all these come from within. So as much as possible, write a lot of music, put out a lot of music, even if they all don't become hits. I mean, get the creativity out of you and out there. And I think that that's exactly what that Lumba did. He gave out everything, everything creatively. You know, every song he thought about, he made, and it was just crazy. Now, yesterday during the discussions online, one of the details that I also heard was that Lumba has about 33 albums. Very mind-boggling. Like, this man would make album after album after album after album. And it was just crazy. So his first album was with Nane Champon. Nane Champon is another high life musician, another legendary high life musician. So they came up with, in fact, the duo formed the Lumba Brothers. I'm not trying to school you. I'm just talking about stuff. And then they brought out the album Yereya Kakwintum, 1989. Right from that album, the following year, he came out with his own album, Ubia Tomesobo, in 1990. And it included iconic There Is a. So I'm just reading and I'm just trying to, as I read or as I go over the albums, I'm just trying to see which of the songs in that album that I'm quite familiar with. I'm sure most of them I am. Not because I intentionally learned them, but like I said, I grew up listening, hearing, even if it was that listening was not intentional. I just grew up hearing it. And so some way, somehow in my subconscious, I just happen to know the music. So that was Teresa was on the 1990 album Obiatomi Sowo. And I hear he dedicated that album or that particular song to Teresa, who obviously the song is named after. I think the woman helped him to travel abroad to Germany, and that's when his music career began. So maybe shout out to Teresa. I don't know where she is now. 1999, he came up with the album Sikasem. Sikasem, Yumba Minsu, Sikasem. Oh my God. 1992, he came up with Playboy. Playboy, I don't know, Playboy. Maybe if I hear the song, I'll remember something. And then Uhiasem, I don't know about that. 1992 was, same 1992, he came up with Vida with Felix Owusu and Mefanko Njaime. I'll check that one out. 1993 was Bibi Jejo. That was another classic, another banger of an album. 1994, Odofofro with Ifwa Ampofwa. Cecil C was 1995. Cecil C was mind blowing, man. Cecil C. I don't know the lyrics. You know, like I said, Lumba escapes me with his lyrics, so I don't really know the lyrics. I'm sure I can sing along some way, somehow. So see, maybe I'll play the songs in this video. I don't know. I don't just won't want to get copyrighted. So yeah, maybe I'll just play some snippets and see. And then in the same 1995, he dropped another album. Like, who even does that? Dropping two albums in a year. So Mesum Jesus also came out with 1995. And it connects to this point that a lot of people have also realized that, Lumba, most of Lumba's music is secular music. He talks about love, life, etc. But then once in a while, Lumba drops a gospel song. He drops gospel music. And this Mesum Jesus was, if I'm not wrong, it was a gospel album. Mesum Jesus, Amanse Nyina Antonio. Yeah, I think I know that Amanse Nyina, that song. Yeah. So he dropped a whole gospel album. The man was a man of many parts. The man just, I'm sure and Lumba emptied himself, as a creative. So it's something that I really admire that he did. Yes, in my last video, I was saying that I would never want to be old and say that there's a lot of ideas and creative projects that I'd wanted to do that I never. No, I want to go out empty. Everything must come out, and that's what Lumba did. 1996, Why Not? I think that was like another gospel. Why Not? We are singing now. Why Not? Oh yeah, yeah. I think that was also another gospel album. Wow. Then in 1997, he came with Back for Good, Take Me Back for Good. Oh, am I wrong? Back for Good was 1996, 1997. Then in 1998, he dropped the legendary Abin Waha. My goodness. And Abin Waha had the Abin Waha track. He also had Dr. Panye, Dr. Bo. And then also had this very iconic song, Odan Tupnumo, a Tupnumo, Sodan Tupnumo. Man, this guy was something else. If you really sit down, you say you're going to be talking about Lumba, I'm sure you can. I'm not a Lumba specialist. I'm not a music specialist, but just by virtue of growing up listening to him, I'm sure that like me or like anybody else, you would have tons and tons and tons to say about this guy. Now, in 1999, he did something that changed the course of high life music and the next generation of Ghanaian music forever. He made an album with Oforian Ponsa, which they dubbed the Millennium Love Songs. And it had a song like Antiate, Mewaro Baba, Nihuya. And if I'm not mistaken, Ohunchere, I think Ohunchere was also on that album. And I'm saying that it changed the course of music over the next, decade or so because it introduced or ushered Oforian Ponsa, who, by the way, is one of the guys that I absolutely love. Now, if I say I'm a High Life fan, then it's because of Oforian Ponsa, and Oforian Ponsa was introduced to us by Daddy Lumba. Because Daddy Lumba's music career began way back, even before I could understand or perceive music and know what was going on, because I was born in the 80s. So I think consciously, when I began to know music quite a bit, was in the early 2000s, and 1999 was when Florian Ponsa had come out with Daddy Lumba, and so naturally, following high life music, I just sort of fell in love with Oforian Ponsa and his style of music, and it's stuck on me ever since. But most importantly, like I'm just saying, we would probably never had heard about him if not for the introduction to Lumba's music. And in 2000, he dropped Mato Odomu. Then in the same 2000 again, he dropped another gospel album. Oh boy, for Boy Jesus, oh man, with Selena Owens. I remember Selena Owens. Yeah, Selena Owens. I remember her. I said that bang for Boy Jesus. These were tracks on the album. Then in 2000, Lumba dropped Poison. Other Poison. And then on that same album was Menyampo, Menya, Menyampo. Just see. Look, man, why are Lumba's lyrics so elusive, man? Personally, I'm somebody who loves music, and most of the music that I love, I somehow know the lyrics to. But the Lumba songs, nah, man, but I love them regardless. Then in 2002, he dropped Memana Trim. Whoa, Memana Trim. And then that Memana Trim had Adipasha Adipem. Ish. Adipasha Adipem. And one of the sticks Lumba has gotten over the years is the use of provocative language or explicit language, in his music. But the funny thing is that it hasn't stopped Ghanaians from loving him. Like, they gave him a stick that, no, this song is for adults. It's too explicit, but oh my goodness. Adepasha Adepemu was 2002. And then, yeah, which was on the Memana Faltrim album. And then in 2002, we heard of Asiehui with Borax. He came with Asiehui. Yeah, that was another banger. Then in 2003, he came with Bubra. Bubra was also another hit. And in 2004, there was Pantuma with Borax. Pantuma. I don't seem to remember that one. Well, in 2004, Ahimfu Chiniye with Pat Thomas. Yeah, I can't seem to remember that one or any song from that album. Then in 2005, there was Area Boy featuring Efua Ampofua. 2005, he came with Give Peace a Chance. Give Peace a Chance. Give Peace a Chance. Some of these songs, I think I'll have to play them, then I'll remember exactly what songs these ones are referring to. Then in 2006, he came up with another explicit one, Tokrom. Yeah, I coached it, whatever. And then Obiatomi Sobo remix. I remember the song so well. He did this remix with Ochami Kwame. Now, the time that Obiatomi Sobo remix came with Ochami Kwame, if I'm not mistaken, I mean, it was just a story out there at that time. Ochami Kwame had just come out of a relationship with Nana Mama Brown, and there's this term in Chi or Akan language that is Ukutia, playing or doing something that sort of rubs salt in the injury of somebody, or just, it's a hate song. Long story short, it's a hate song. So it's the hate song trying to stir up beef. So, Ochame Kwame's rap on that song, I quite remember.
Bofia now sake me. Now boy no take me. Me no pia now hide me.
Yeah, that it was almost as like an Ekutia to Anama Brown. This was the story out there. I'm not even kidding. But anyway, I think one time he cleared the air and said that was not the issue, but nobody cares about what he had to say afterwards. Okay. So in 2007, he came up with Agenda. In 2008, Sika, which had Simiso remix. Simiso. I'll find out more about that one. Then in 2009, our Repa Ye Inibre. In 2011, Koshepo. Is that right? Koshepo. And on that same album had Yeno Circa. Now, Yeno Circa was a banger, mostly because it entered into the political sphere and politicians. I think, if I'm not mistaken, that was Kufo or something. They used that song quite a bit. Yeno Circa or something like that. I don't quite remember, but it was quite a banger then too. Then in 2014, that was the first time I'd seen Lumba have quite a long break in between albums. So from Circle in 2011, the next album he released was in 2014. So that was like a 3-year gap. Awoso. And that was another Ekutia song, another hit song. I also had the famous track Nia Hubeto or Yentiobia. Was the Yen? Yeah, I think the Yentiobia too was quite famous, in political spheres. And that's the point I'm making, that Lumba's song transcends every aspect of Ghanaian society, and that's how come everybody sort of knows him, connects with him, and relates with most of his music, because this song was probably, he didn't make it to political, but it entered into political spheres again. Circa. Then in 2020, 2015, he came back with another gospel, Hosanna, in 2015 with Great Ampon. Hosanna, Jesus is a winner. Oh, I'll check that one out. I'm not quite familiar with the song. In 2016, he came with Enkodeng. Now, guys, if you're quite familiar with any of the albums and some of the music that was on the album, you can share in the comment section below. I cannot cover the entire 33 albums. I'm just trying to have a brief overview, and that's it for what I have. But on the other side, on the sites, Lumba had other bangers for politicians. Again, back to the topic of politics. There were songs he made for Nanado in 2016, the 2016 election, which saw Nanado win the elections massively. It was crazy. And I think subsequently he made a couple more bangers for him and for the party. In my last video, I was making fun of the savvy Ghanaian jogger, saying that they had on all the fancy gadgets, the watch and the earphones and all that kind of stuff. Now my phone has gone off. I've been using my phone to track my steps. I had a call some minutes ago. I talked for a very long time, and then my phone just died. But before I set off, I had very low battery before I set off from the house. Now the phone has just died, and so my Jimmy Niso. So I think it's time to also get a watch. Not trying to be fancy, but it has what it does, so that I can keep my phone calls on the phone and track my steps and my health on the watch. Daddy Lumba will forever be missed, will forever remain a legend and an icon, but his music will continue to live on. His music will never die. I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.